Hey guys, so a couple of weeks ago I brought the results of the balance prediction survey that I created, which essentially reflects what the community thinks in terms of what will get banned on the next list. But this time around I wanted to bring my own thoughts in terms of what I think will actually get hit, and so you can certainly check out that old ban list prediction survey video. I'll link that down below. And in terms of the timing, I know some of you might think, hey man, it's still too early for predictions, but I'm not really sure about that because we do have Worlds this coming weekend, and after that I think it's fair game, especially when we have a slate of YCS happening from early September, and on top of that we also have the soul burning volcano set coming out next week, and it would also be a good time to put that gazelle to at least 2 on the next list. So just some thoughts. I mean, it might not come until September still, but hopefully it still does come early. So let's just get right to the prediction. So I think we're gonna start off. Let's just start with anti-spell fragments. As much as I want this card to get hit, I don't think it will, because it's just constantly dodged the list up to this point, and it's a very old card actually, and I'm not a fan of, cards that just completely shut down mechanics, but you know what? I think one day it will get hit, but probably not right now. We're going to skip the Calamity for now, and you know what? Let's just go right to the Rise Heart, and this is a card a lot of people are hoping would get banned, and for some reason I forgot to put this in the prediction survey, so that was my bad, but definitely people did make it in the comments in terms of, that this should be banned, and I think it's fair. It's a card that not only just banishes everything, which is on its own very powerful, but also being able to just attach any card as well, something like in combination with whatever you banish out Prosperity, which can give it additional effects to something like Garura or the Infinity Track Link. So I think it's far too strong, and just the banish face down mechanic is really toxic to me. So hopefully it does actually get hit. In terms of D-Barrier, this is another card similar to the lines of Anti-Spell Fragments. I actually don't think they'll hit it again. If anything, if it was to get hit, it should have been done a while back, realistically. Back, especially when Labyrinth and Branded were kind of like the emerging meta contenders post, I believe, I forget what set now. But yeah, at that point, if it didn't get banned, I don't think it would get hit now. But, someday it should be, I think. Shifter, so this is a hot contention, contender for every ban list really, and I think honestly, if they were to hit it, they probably start with a semi-limit, kind of like how the OCG did it, which essentially just lowers the consistency, but people will still play it even if it's a 2, at least for the decks that really benefit the most. Let's say it's something like Fluanderies, Kashira obviously, although it kind of depends on how hard Kashira is actually hit. So I think it's definitely a bannable card. And especially with Gamma being limited recently, that actually does give me hope that Konami is actually willing to hit certain really strong, powerful hand traps that are just kind of turn ending, or can be turn ending rather. And so, hopefully it at least gets hit, ideally banned. But you know what? Even if it gets semi-limited, I'll really take that, because I think this card should have been hit a while ago. So now maybe we can cover Calamity. So I'm a little hesitant about this. Originally I was going to put it in no change, because Konami, while historically they have eventually hit the really problematic cards that completely shut things down, like let's say True King of Calamities, you have Numeron Zexal, as well as even Scythe. But you know what? I think if you're gonna hit some of these other decks, like let's say Kashira, then you have to kind of account for these sort of tier 2 or next level meta contenders, and they might become too strong. And I think Manadium and other synchro strategies, if they can turbo this out, it's really not good for the game. Although admittedly, I think even right now, Manadium, I'm actually finding that they're not all going for this Calamity lock either. Perhaps it's more vulnerable, I'm not too sure. But you know what, it's probably for the best if it just goes away. Engage, I'm seeing a lot of people put Engage at 3. I'm not sure that's actually going to happen, to be honest with you. I think it's very surprising that they even put it to 2 in the first place. I get it. Sky Striker didn't really accomplish much since that semi-limit of Engage. Of course, it did top the remote YCS by Dylan Fricker that I have the profile on my channel. But other than that, I think even at regional level, it didn't really see that much success. So I get it. So that's why maybe they think, it can come to 3, and perhaps. But I think for now, that's probably not the best, in my view at least. I think Engage at 3 is just far too strong. So who knows. Eradicator is another card that I think will finally get banned. Again, these problematic cards, Konami, while for the most part, they do hit them, it kind of takes them a while to actually get there. I mean, they did ban Curious not that long ago, which was a little random in the sense that it they banned it much later after it was actually a problem. But you know, Curious will always be a problem in the future, which one of the reasons was because it could dump something like Eradicator, and then Griffin can set it. And Eradicator, we've seen time and time again, you know, something like Labyrinth can turbo out a lot easier than other decks, but then again, you have a lot of other decks like Ashira, even sometimes branded, or let's say like rogue decks too, even like Hero, like they can play Eradicator and just ripping out a lot of spells from your opponent's hand. In today's game where most people are running a lot of spells, I think it's a little too much and perhaps time to go. Some Kashir cards, but also not really, is Fenrir, because it's such a generic staple, and you are seeing this in a variety of different decks at 3. It's just a very powerful card, just being able to banish face-up cards, and it's also a big body to boot, and its ability to summon is not once per turn, it's just crazy as well. And you know, we did see the hits on OCG on this card, so I think limiting is a pretty fair start. Speaking of further limits is Runic Fountain, which is kind of funny because I think very recently the play of Runic decks have kind of fallen down a bit compared to just like, you know, let's say rewind back a month ago. And I think, you know, Fountain to 2, like in that last list, was kind of dumb because it really didn't do much. Like there were plenty of lists that were playing 2 Fountains anyways. So I think at least, you know, put it to 1 or this or tip, and we'll get to that. But not too huge of a hit anymore, just because at least right now it's not seeing a huge amount of play. But again, if you hit some of these other top decks, then it might come back, right? So those are things to consider. I think Konami historically has shown that they don't really like cards that draw too much and usually limit them. The exception being Engage, which somehow came back to 2, but other than that, for the most part, it seems like they don't like to have too many draw cards available. Gazelle is something I spoke to just earlier in the video. You know, we do have Soul Burning Volcano coming out soon, and so I think Gazelle is good timing to put it to at least 2. It could honestly just come back to 3, but I think they've typically shown that they like to put it at 2 first, and then the next list they'll put it to 3. And I mean, honestly, quite puzzling why they didn't do that already, and realistically I think it might just be that they just intentionally held on making this decision until this Soul Burning set comes out, just so they can promote the product more. Because let's be honest, you know, Konami, while they do try to make these ban lists to make the competitive scene better, a part of the decisions have definitely shown that it had some business aspects to it. So Gazelle, actually, if you're looking for Soul Burning Volcano pre-order singles, you can certainly check out Card Brawlers, and also Tier 0 will have it later up today as well at the time of recording. And so, you know, you can use code Hakuna5 for 5% off and get those Ghost Sunlight Wolves. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, I think this is how they're going to do it. They're probably going to ban this, even though what I personally said was just ban Sanctifier instead. I get it, it's a new card, but you know what, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's immune from ban. But if you ban Sanctifier, then that means all the other monsters that lock, you don't have to worry about them anymore, right? Because we have plenty of other options. Technically, let's say if this gets banned, probably the next option is something like Idol, because it's also a level 6 Stark, which means you can dump it off of Granule, which is kind of like the most important part of the lock, just being able to dump through Granule, because it just provides a little flexibility and can make it easier for locking your opponent. Of course, with Idol, it's not like Gimmick Puppet, it's not a lingering effect, so if you can get rid of it, then you are free to special summon for that turn. But at the same time, I think, you know, if they ban Gimmick Puppet, perhaps it actually pushes branded players to just no longer bother with, you know, going for the lock, because even though there are other monsters that exist that can lock, you know, it's still possible that there's just no longer worth it, right? And an example is, let's say a while back, a few years ago, you know, the Buster Whelp lock in Dragon Link, which locked the opponent from the extra deck, it eventually got banned, and then also Union Carrier got banned, and eventually Buster Whelp actually came back on the list, rather back into the format. But at the same time, even though people right away figured out a new way to Buster Lock in Dragon Link, no one played it anymore, just because, you know, even though it exists, if it's not just optimal way of playing it anymore, they just don't bother. So, you know, I could kind of see why, if they ban Gimmick Puppet, maybe their hope is that people just don't bother with other locks anymore, even though it does exist, they're just not as good. Unlimited, I don't have much for Unlimited. I think this is the only one really. Orange, I originally got put to 1 during Tier 0 format, because, you know, this picture Guido or Kelbeck like pretty good. But now, you know, you don't have that, and Drytron has just completely fallen off the face of the earth, and this was kind of used a lot in Drytron, especially in combination with Eva, which was really deadly, but Eva is still banned, so I think this is fine to come back at 3. It came back to 2 recently, honestly did nothing, so I think that's fine. More Kashira cards, Unicorn. I think this is obviously the best one in Kashira. Just this card alone on itself can just pop off. And so yeah, I think they put this to 2 last list. Didn't do that much. Honestly, I think you can go back and forth between this or Rebirth. Rebirth is also a crazy card, but I think if you already put these Kashir names to 1, then I think it's okay, because then you don't have as many names to bring off of Rebirths. But you know what, I'm pretty okay with either of those 2 choices. Bestial Magmanut. Originally, I was going to put it in no change, but I think, again, if you were to hit some of these other top decks, primarily Kashira, then Bestial's become really good again, and they were already seeing play anyways, and Magmanut, especially with Dragon Link having emerged a lot recently, this card is just far too good. In just any deck it's good, but in Dragon Link in particular is also very good, because it can just search like your core engine pieces, and even in branded as well, it can be quite good, because there are some good targets other than just like Druid's Worm, for example. So I think this card definitely should get put to 1. I believe OCG put it to 1 a while back. I think that really makes sense. And speaking of putting to 1, definitely Prosperity. I know I say this like every single banlist prediction, but this card has to go. Realistically, I actually think this card should be banned, now that I think about it. But for now, I think they should put it to 1. Maybe they start at 2, but it's been around for a while too. It's not even a new card anymore, and you have so many meta decks in the past, year or two that's been able to use this card so effectively, especially now Kashira, because not only do they get benefit from actually excavating 6, which is a lot to in terms of boosting consistency, but on top of that, you can banish extra deck monsters like Garura, the Infinity Track Link, like I mentioned, or some other cards, attach it to a Rise Heart, and then a Rise card can get additional effects. So I really don't like that. I think this card really does have to go at this point. This card just reflects adventure token package in general. I don't think they're going to hit it. I know some people thought maybe it might get hit, and I kind of get it, because adventure synchron, we don't actually know how powerful it is going to be in this new format. So far, I think a lot of people though have pegged that deck as like kind of like rogue, maybe like low of tier 2 strategy. And again, once you start hitting all these other decks, maybe it does actually come back. But this is another example of why you should maybe preemptively hit Calamity, because they can also go into that as well. So I think for now it's safe, especially when back when adventure token stuff first came out with the Brave, or rather adventure DP pile decks, and if that didn't get hit around that time, I get it, it was kind of new, but it was still pretty toxic. So if it didn't get hit then, I don't think it would get hit right now, at least. Skill Drain's another card. I think they got to put it back to 1. I believe it came to 3 around the time Labyrinth was about to eventually become one of the meta contenders, and perhaps it's kind of there to support these trap decks, because they've been struggling for quite some time, and prior to that being Eldritch being the last kind of trap meta deck. So I think I kind of get that perspective, but now Labyrinth is still quite strong, and Skill Drain is just incredibly strong and just not really fun to deal with, and it never should have came off of 1 to begin with. Even at 1 it's still pretty sacky, but this card definitely should go to 1. And speaking of also another card going to 1 is Sprite Starter. So I know a lot of people kind of go between Blue or Jet or Starter. I think especially with the Sprite, it's kind of been on a downfall lately in terms of representation, and being a Sprite player myself, like if you hit Starter, that's definitely like a lot bigger. Like hitting Blue, sure, but the deck becomes much more normal summon reliant as you continue to hit something like Starter, because you've already limited Gamma, which means they no longer can really play like E-Telly as another pseudo Sprite Starter essentially, and have a level 2 body easily without having to normal summon. But when you get rid of Starters, it really does become way more fragile and very easy to stop. So I think this is like the better hit, and if anything, if Sprite was doing even better right now, you could have even hit a bigger card like such as Sprint, because that card is honestly nuts. But right now, again, with Sprite kind of on a downfall, I think you can just hit Starter instead. Super Poly is another card that used to be a 1 and slowly came off the list a few years ago now. I believe it was like 2019, and so definitely a card that should eventually get put to rest. I think right now it is probably needed in the format with, like, let's say Manadeum, and being able to Super Poly. Infernoble is another new format deck that can also kind of succumb to Super Poly as well. It's unfortunate that you cannot respond to it, but I think for now it's kind of a necessary evil. Of course, not gonna lie, it does benefit Branded more than other decks, because it can get this card live a lot easier than any other deck. But for now, I think it's here to stay. I've already mentioned about Runic Tip. I think you either hit tip as well and keep the fountain at 2 and maybe put tip to 1. I think that's interchangeable. One of the two cards I think still does need to get hit, even though maybe you don't see as much runic, at least at the start of this new format. Speaking of, similar to Labyrinth, I know some people mention like big welcome or regular welcome. I think it's fine. Labyrinth, I honestly think it's still fair as long as you get some of these problematic cards like Eradicator and Skill Drain. Ideally, D-Barrier should go away too, but again, I just don't think they're going to hit it right now because it's also actually not seeing that much play. But you never know, it might see more play now that if these top decks get hit and you have like just Synchro Turbo everywhere and you kind of need D-Barrier. So that's definitely something that I think is worth considering. I think Labyrinth for now is fine. You just get rid of those problematic floodgates. And lastly, in the semi-limit, I'm just going to put the Dragonic diagram because honestly, I'm surprised it didn't come to at least 2 at this point. Like I believe a couple lists ago, we started seeing some True King cards come off the list. And at least also in the perspective like True Draco, for example, that also utilizes this card really well. That deck is just absolutely not a problem to deal with. It's just like unplayable. I used to play True Draco. It's how I started Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think they can get this to 2 and it would be totally fine and not much, you're not going to miss much. And so anyways, that was it for my own ban list predictions. Feel free to roast me in the comments. I'm really happy to do any kind of discussions with these kind of ban lists. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. A big thanks to my patrons for always supporting the channel. Really means a lot. And well, take care guys.